me and captured me and raped me. And against their will, they held her against their will. Now there's a story again that the captors made up. This is she didn't write one word. She didn't write one word. The person who's doing all this writing is John Rolfe and Captain John Smith and various other people who were basically not really her friends. These were not people that was qualified to mention her in a positive light, and they probably were the very people who had basically, done all these things to her. I mean, there's periods of her life after she produced, during the time where she was producing children, so to speak, where nobody knew what was happening. All they know is that she was living somewhere near Chesterfield, Virginia, and some person was keeping her there, obviously against her will, secretly, far enough from Powhatan where Powhatan could not find her, where Tsenacommacah or Abduction, none of these people who desperately wanted his daughter back. He couldn't find her. Now they made up a story that her time was up. That's basically what John Rolfe said. When her time was up, Matoaka decided that she'd rather stay with the colonies. She was mad with her dad because he took so long to come get her. So therefore, since he took so long to come get her, she'd just rather stay with her captive. And later, not before, later, she converts to Christianity wholeheartedly. But yet, when she went to England, she took her number one priest, native priest, with her. Well, if she was really trying to be a Christian, why would she bring the sun-worshipping Native American priest with her to England as her confidant? I mean, those two, if you know anything about the religion, they don't necessarily blend. There's no way you can get the Native American concept and the Christian concept to agree with each other. One is based on this character called Jesus. The other one is based on Mashe Manuto, nature. Nature. Nature is God. And one of the toughest aspects of nature is, guess what? The sun. That's one of the most obvious elements that you can see when you look up in the sky. So, and also they had, eagle is a falcon. An eagle is a type of falcon. All the colonials did was they saw that the Native Americans, they had studied, by this point, Egypt began to get studied in Europe. And certain educated people, the same people who called her Pocahontas, which is Greek and Latin. Poca means little in Latin, and Hontas means whore in Greek. And the same people that call her Pocahontas also realized that the Native Americans, one of the most sacred birds was the eagle. And then a short time after that, let's say about 100 years later, I won't even say 100, let's say about 50 to 75 years later, when they're trying to design a country, these people were not even original enough to get their own iconography. They stole iconography from Egypt, and they stole iconography from the Native Americans. So the American eagle is Native American. It's a Native American concept. It is not a concept that they came up all by themselves with. They basically came up with the studies of Egypt, which they blended with the studies of the Native American culture. So they were paying attention to the Native American culture. They was definitely paying some attention. They was paying attention to that. And they was paying attention to the so-called pagan religion of the Native Americans. which again was based on the sun. I mean, and so what you had is you have so I don't know that Matoaka, I don't know how Christian she was, and so anybody who actually know the Native Americans, see, if you don't know the Native Americans' perspective, you know that the whole story of her being a Christian is hogwash. Because it's no way you're going to have your own Native American priest with you, and at the same time, you're going to be a Christian. It's just, those two things are in direct conflict. Direct conflict. And it's either got to be one way or the next. And you know how it is with the Christians. And she got Christianized in England. That's where they thought enough for her to get Christianized. Where all of the important ceremonies of Christianity happened. In England, when John Rolfe was trying to legitimize himself as an important family of the Americas, as the aristocracy. Now he has a chance to go from a merchant status. That's basically what he was. He had a chance to go from a lowly aristocrat, not a top aristocrat, a lowly aristocrat, to a upper aristocrat status. And the way he was going to get there was by way of Matoaka. And by claiming that she had royal blood, and by him marrying her, therefore he is a royal of the New World. That's basically what his claim was. And they basically putting him in a position where his family could marry into the royal families, into the noble families of England. Because even in England, Captain John Smith kept telling Matoaka, I cannot talk to you. You're not on my station. You're above my station. And what Matoaka said to him was, all that time when you was with my father, and you were terrorizing my father was in fear of you. All the natives of America was in fear of you. And you had no problems attacking us and jacking us up, basically. And you didn't really respect me then, but now all of a sudden here, when I meet she actually met her as king, but she didn't meet the king in an official way. She met him in such a casual way. He didn't take her serious. He just wanted to see what a native looked like. And once I believe it was King James. Once King James saw what Matoaka looked like, okay, dismiss, bye. That was all to it. So there was no reception of Matoaka as this. All that stuff was invented later, where you have Pocahontas, who was built up way after all these people died. King James had died, and basically it was John Rolfe and his family. Even after John Rolfe has passed, his family still, he remarried. He remarried a white woman. And the whole idea was for his family to be, that's white now, including the one I think that could pass. The one that could pass is a white state in England, I believe. But the only one that could pass, I mean, he felt like he could pass as long as he was in, I'm not going to say pass. He thought he was good as long as he was in the Americas. They really needed to prove themselves. They needed to prove themselves as the first family of the Americas. And guess what? They went into government. They were some of the people who set up all these original slave laws. John Rolfe. They were some of the people who, and they used Thomas Rolfe, Matoaka's son, as just like they used Matoaka. He became famous after he died, simply because he was the first person. He was considered the first intermarried the first child between the English and the natives, and he was considered the first legitimate heir to inherit, guess what? The whole state of Virginia. And so Matoaka and the native people after Powhatan Confederacy died, way after Powhatan Chicano died, way after Powhatan Chicano, all these people died and Matoaka died. The native people said, well, Matoaka was standing in position to inherit. I mean, perhaps Powhatan Tsenacommacah had her in position to inherit everything, because obviously she was supposed to be married to another person, and that was Jackawa's son, Kakun. That was her first person she was betrothed to. And what you don't understand with Powhatan Chicano, the Powhatans could actually marry their cousins, or they could even marry their nieces, or they could marry their aunts, because of the fact that the dominant man wanted to keep the kingship. He wanted to keep authority in make sure that he could keep it. So in other words, say for example, you're a brother of the king, or if you're a son of the king. Here's your sister. She's going to get everything. You're not going to get anything, and you're this tough guy. So you don't want to marry your sister, but you can marry your sister's cousin, or you can marry your sister's aunt, or somebody that's a little bit removed from you. I don't think you can actually marry your sister. I don't think they actually married their sister, but that was normal for the Tsenacommacah to do because of the way the matriotic system worked. It was very normal for a dominant man like Powhatan Chicano to actually marry, not necessarily his sister, but anybody who was the descendant of Matoaka's mother. Anybody who was a descendant of her was a person of very importance, because that was the bloodline of the original forefathers for thousands of years uninterrupted. And that was very important. It's very important to maintain that, both in their religious practice, and of course that had to do also with the sun worship and the sun worship, and with the nature worship. So that's why I said, well, if Matoaka even thought she was a princess still after becoming Christianized, she knew that she could not be a princess if she was a Christian because of who she was. I mean, it would instantly default to her sister or back to her mother. And guess what? These men, that's why they had so many children. She had many, many, many children, all of which could have been the same status, the same bloodline, because the bloodline went through the women. It had to be somebody of that particular bloodline that was that the main Wessawarks, and she was a Wessawa squaw. And so that was the only way that a man could be the Wessawarks. That was the only way. And especially if he was going to be the paramount Wessawarks. In other words, the main king of kings, or the rest of Wessawarks is a governor. And of course, the paramount Wessawarks is the paramount king. He is the emperor, so to speak. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm just kind of tapping in a little bit of details here and there. Just trying to get some things going in terms of just getting more and more of the white part of the canvas blocked off. And it is very, I'm not going to say it's very hard, but it's kind of difficult to paint and, I'm teaching history and painting at the same time. that's not the easiest thing in the world to do. So, especially this painting is kind of complicated. It's not a it's not an easy painting, and also I'm presenting also, so it's a ton of little things that I'm doing here. That's I'm learning though. I'm making some adjustments. Okay, so in order for the British to have a solid claim off of the genocide that they were perpetrating on the Native Americans, they needed Matoaka, because it was never something that was designed for either the Native American nor the African person to participate in. But these people did still find a way, to participate, even though that both groups, the African and the Native, were considered heathens. And in many letters and in many documentation, you'll see this over and over and over, where they're referring to these people as heathens. And you'll find also that a lot of these English guys, because there was a lack of women over here, so many of them would say, okay, well, it ain't that many English women that's willing to come over here to this place. It's all forest. It's basically a lot of death going on. Natives running around just tomahawking people left and right. I mean, they didn't want to come. So a lot of the original whites that came here, most of them, and they wanted to get rich, most of them had a Native wife or they had an African wife, because those were the only females that was here. There just weren't any. There weren't, and that's why John Rolfe, a person of semi-noble stature, that's why he had Matoaka. There was a lot of opportunities. They saw that right away as soon as they left England. Man, all of the rules that applied here in England don't necessarily apply as we're on this road here. These rules just don't apply. So, why am I still holding on to this English woman? Maybe if she just disappeared all of a sudden, I could really expand on some things. I could become a king. Not to say that he was planning on Matoaka from the beginning, but it's just, I think that even in Bermuda, they already had a lot of women in Bermuda. And if you was to look at some of the dialogue that went on between these men, you can see kind of like why his first English wife just suddenly died. Because they were basically sitting around just saying, hey, if I had this woman, I could do this. And then if I had that woman, I could do the other thing. Then the next thing you know, his English wife just won't dare no more. So that's why I think the reason Matoaka wasn't there no more, you had somebody who was basically into himself. You had somebody who was into taking care of himself. And he used women to get what he could. And then he went on to basically, he could write. It was his word. He could basically make things whatever he wanted to. She died because of a disease. She died because of this. Or I wanted her to become a Christian, and she wanted to become a Christian. And upon dying, she said, all I care is not my life. All I care is that my child liveth. Do you really think that's what she said? I mean, a child of a rape, that's his child. And the only thing she would say is that it's not so much me living, but at least my child is living, and he's going to go on to look out for the colony in my stead. I don't think so. The only person that was interested in preserving the colony, you're putting words in her mouth. There is no proof that Matoaka even said any of these things. Only thing you have is that John Roth wrote that. And the people who wanted to make this into a colony for the British wrote that. Because again, it sounds very, very romantic. It sounds very, very perfect. Especially if you want to get a lot of English people to come over here in the New World and help you grow tobacco and get rich. Help you grow corn and tobacco and get furs out of the land and get the timber out of the land and so forth. Now, if you needed to get all that stuff, you needed people. You needed both the slave and you needed both the Englishmen who had some of the English culture in them enough to be able to go ahead and establish those things. To be able to do those things for them, because most of these aristocratic type people, most of these owner type people, they didn't do the work themselves. They got somebody else to do it. And so that is the whole importance of Matoaka. That's why they made her into all this stuff after the fact. They made her into all this stuff after the fact because that was a good way to justify all of the wealth that they was getting. That was a way to justify all the deaths that they was administering to the Native Americans. Because if you don't agree with what the Matoaka said, and your own Matoaka said so, and you need to go the way of Matoaka, I don't know why you don't, but since you're not, you deserve to get killed. Now, John Smith was 54 years old when Matoaka was 16 years old and dying. Maybe she was 17. Based on her birth records, I mean, that's her age. These guys were despicable people. I mean, you could see, and she called him father. Because by the time she got to this point, now this is according to some English records, when they were sitting there watching Captain John Smith trying to see. That's why I think that she died, because if some more people got a chance to interrogate her, it was going to come out what he was going to do. And all his pious religiousness would have been exposed. I mean, you got a person who was very concerned about how he appeared in his society. And he was over there in the Americas doing some dirt. And he didn't want this stuff to get out. And he was just lucky to get out of England with his reputation still halfway intact. He was just lucky for that. And so he says, okay, I can't risk any more English people, because a lot of people are going to want to talk to her. Because we sit there and talked her up and made her into a princess. I don't know if she's a princess or not. Her dad is not even living anymore. So I don't even know how good my claim of this is. But we built her up in England. So if she gets a chance to keep, she's young. She's got a chance to do a lot of things in the future. And so if I leave her living, she can really disrupt this whole fantasy that I just made up. She could destroy the whole thing. And I spoke to some very important people in England. I'm going to look like a liar. I'm going to look like a con artist, and that's what he was. And I'm going to look like a person who just exploited everybody just for my own personal wealth, which that's exactly what he was. So that's why I believe John Roth actually had her poisoned, and she died on the way. Because that was a very... on the ship, where's the law at? And a lot of people on cruises, on ships then, coming to the New World, it was known that a lot of people took a risk to die. They died. So that was a great place to kill someone, was on one of these cruises. And a lot of women died on these cruises when they was with some pretty... And when she called him father in England, Captain John Smith feared. He trembled in fear. because she called him father. And he wasn't in fear because she called him father. He was in fear because royal people heard this. And they were picking up the story. They were very keen to, they were suspicious of John Smith. John Smith had fallen out of favor in England. And I believe John Smith probably told John Rolfe, hey, look, man, the gig is up with this. We got to make her go away, man. There's no more benefit of this. We're both going to go down. We did some pretty despicable stuff over there, and it's going to come to light. And we're going to lose all our credibility in London, and especially amongst the royals, and we might even wind up getting dragged to court or worse. So, and they were standing in position to lose everything. So, Matoaka died. And that's the whole story of Matoaka. That's basically the who, what, whens, and where, and how of the so-called person called Pocahontas, which basically means little whore. How's it going, Kevin King, Denala Mayat, Michael Phillips, Harold Struble? How's it going, everybody? So, this is why a lot of Native Americans refuse to call her Pocahontas, because they understand what the trick was. The average American in school doesn't understand that trick, because they're going to believe what the teacher says. You know, the teacher said Pocahontas did this and that, the other thing, you know. You know, the teacher said this and that. But, like I say, I basically went to the local high school, you know, down the street, down the road from where I live. I spoke to the history teacher. And I said, why do you teach this? And I talked to him about everything. I even talked to him about Greek. You're teaching everybody Greek history. You got African American people in this school, but you don't teach anything about Africa or West Africa or Kemet or. I said, you talk about Greeks. The Greeks learned from the Egyptians. I said, do you know the Egyptians in Africa? And do you know that this person, that person studied? Not only that, you teach about Matoaka. And he knew who Matoaka was. He knew that was the person they called Pocahontas. Now I said, you teach her name as though she is called Matoaka, when you know, maybe her name is Pocahontas. And I was surprised that he actually knew that her actual name was Matoaka. And then he actually told the lie story. And he knew that there's a very strong chance that, yes, John Rolfe and John's Captain John Smith probably was lying about her. And some of the things that I'm telling you guys right now is probably true. He admitted it. And the funny part about it, he had a African-American substitute guy with him who was looking at me like really weird. He was looking at me really bad, like, why are you doing this? You know, kind of look. And he was shocked that the white guy was agreeing with me. And so all of a sudden he started kind of like listening. Before he was like kind of shrugging me off like, okay, we don't want to hear what you got to say, man. So so what I'm saying is that the programming is so deep that nobody wants to believe the truth anymore. Everybody wants to believe the lie. The lie is so much, so well told. The lie is so well told. I mean, then you even get Hollywood, and you know, I don't know why. Again, if this was a Holocaust, a woman who a Nazi raped her during World War II, would you tell this story this way? Even if it was a speculation that a Nazi might have done this. Even if there was a speculation that this person might have been a victim of a Nazi this way, would you even bother to tell this story this way? But when it comes down to a Native American or certain people who are some of the original people of this country, it seems like it's okay. It seems like it's okay for certain people to go ahead and just basically disrespect the actual memory of these people, the suffering of these people. And as though these people really didn't suffer. As though these people actually were not victims at all. These people were happy people who really, all the propaganda that was told about them is true. Again, I don't understand why a person who don't even understand who English were. I mean, again, if she met them when she was 11, and she only lived to 16 years, she only lived to 16, that means she only had 5 years. And you're trying to tell me she had 5 years to perfect English, to not only perfect English, to come up with this grand scheme that the Americas is going to be this new place where all nations are going to live together as one underneath the English flag. When she was in position to own everything. Her father literally owned everything. I don't believe that's what she thought. Especially if the record that the English people said, that she said to Captain John Smith, especially that she said that, well, we all feared you. And then all of a sudden here in England, simply because I call you father, you fear me. Just little me. And there, you were to live in terror. In other words, you were the person who raped me. You're the person who killed my husband. You're the persons that tried to kill my father, tried to kill all my family members, killed so many people in my tribe. But yet, I'm cool with you. I'm good with you. You can kill all those people in my family. Perhaps my husband, who I had a child with. You can kill all these people. But I still want England, the colony, to be safe. I still want everything that you told me about everything to be the motto of everything. I mean, you just have to be willing to believe a lie. You just got to be willing. You just have to be really willing to be gullible, to believe that something like this could be something. I mean, that's kind of like Martin Luther King's wife saying after her husband died, I just think everything should be good, I just think that my people should just get over it. And my husband fought basically for nothing. And everything that he stood for, just don't worry about it. I'm going to go ahead and do exactly what the other people who hate my guts believe I should do. Without taking any regard for the mottos of your own father or your own husband and the things that they stood for. I just don't think I don't think people would do that. I don't think people would change their religion. I mean, try to get a Christian person to change their religion. Try to get a Muslim person to change their religion. Try to get a Hindu person to change their religion. Anybody to just suddenly change their religion. That's hard to do. Now, this is how you can do it if you abduct the person and then you write for that person. You become the main mouthpiece for that person. And you're telling the whole world that this is what this person believed. And do you really expect anybody else other than a person who is going to benefit from this lie to actually believe that that this person really saw things the way that you wanted them to see it? They really saw it that way. I don't think so. I think she saw her people devastated. And when you see her take action, it was always to save the lives of her villagers. She knew there was going to be a consequence if somebody took a piece of a tool. If a native stole a tool, like an axe or a shovel or something like that, there was going to be a consequence, especially if they stole a weapon like a sword. They were going to come after that native. They were going to destroy a whole village because they definitely didn't want a native to get a sword, because a native could do a lot of damage with a sword. Because now all of a sudden you don't have a stone club or a stone knife. You actually have a metal knife. And you can equip any kind of axe handle into a tomahawk. And you can equip any kind of spearhead into a spear. You can take a shovel and make a very, very formidable spear with it. And etc. and etc. So it was very important that the Native Americans did not get a hold of any British tools too much. And if they did, it usually was a sign that the British was in a very compromising position. And that was the only way for them to get some type of grace period where they could actually that the natives would take it easy, because what the natives were going to do is they were going to come back later and use those very same tools. Therefore, the British wanted to come and get those back most all the time. If they gave it to somebody, they wanted to eventually come get that back. That wasn't something that was going to, going to be allowed to be possessed by the Native American. So, the only historians who support the fictitious story of Pocahontas are the colonials who stood to benefit in terms of property and land and status. In other words, to be a first family, be considered a first family of the Virginians. Because that's how the English society worked. It was based on who you were. If you were important, basically everything was almost given to you. And if you weren't important, you basically didn't get anything that much. So, again, I don't believe Matoaka's last words were not that it's not so much that I die, but my son liveth. I don't think so. I think that was in the benefit of one person. That's John Rolfe. It's like, well, I don't need you anymore. I got a son, and he speaks English very well because he's been raised as my son as an Englishman, and he might look brown enough for the Native Americans to consider him one of them, because they thought that the royal blood went through the male heir. At the same time, they kind of knew that the royal blood went through the female heir, but since he was a son of Matoaka, that didn't count. It had to be the daughter. And now, the daughter of Matoaka was born to Wacom. So there was a daughter who was protected. She was kept by a certain tribe, and she was kept very, very secret. Now, she may have gone to Oklahoma eventually, or I think that she didn't. I think what happened was she stayed in the area. I believe her family is still in the area today, and her female descendant is still there. Now, whether she can claim anything or not, at this point, I don't know about that. But I do know that there's a strong possibility that somebody of the Tsenacommacah matriotic descent, royal descent, is still living in this area and very much alive. Now, whether the problem is that the Native Americans started getting selected after a certain period in time. they started getting selected because because it constantly became a situation where the Native Americans was getting messed over, and they was constantly rebelling against the government, the local, whatever the new rules were. And so what happened was the white colonies, the English colonizers said, you know, we're gonna have to start selecting your reservoirs. We got to start selecting your kings. So what you can do is you can elect somebody, then we have to approve that person. If we don't approve that person, we're not going to recognize him as the reservoirs. You have to present someone to us that we're going to recognize. And then oftentimes they would just outright find a person who is basically a sellout, and they would just basically say, okay, he's in charge of you, whether the local people wanted him or not. And then over time, this kept going on and on and on until there was no leaders, until people basically forgot. There was no importance of having a reservoirs anymore because, in effect, there was no reservoirs. So, and then they made up laws like the officer of the tribe could only be elected for 3 years. And not for life. Not like Powhatan Tsenacommacah, where he died at 92 years old. And Tsenacommacah, who also lived into his 90s, perhaps even 100 years old. No, not like these guys. 3 years. And then what happened was, you got to report this, and every time, even in the state of Virginia, the Mattaponi and the Pamunkey, I believe, they go to the governor's mansion and give them a turkey and a deer. Even today, every Thanksgiving, they go to the governor's mansion and give the governor a turkey and a deer as tribute for peace. They never stopped doing that. That's how bad of sellouts that the people who kept power became. They happily do that. And a lot of these people, I hate to say it, they're probably more mixed with English than they are native. Because that whole idea was a disdain to the native people back in the day, in the old days. And it was only the sellouts that was like it was popular amongst. And now it's forgotten that was a sellout thing to do. It was forgotten that it was a disrespect to your people and the pride of the Tsenacommacah to actually be one of those people who actually brought that in and handed it to the governor in defeat. Because what they're trying to do is they're going with the propaganda that what Pocahontas did was give them food and sustain them. So basically, if they wouldn't have sustained them, they couldn't have taken over this whole country. So it's basically selling in that the whole storyline, the entire storyline is supported by the fact that they still today, especially on Thanksgiving, and that's one of the reasons that Thanksgiving is also, you know, they did the same thing to the natives in Pennsylvania and other places like that. But a lot of the Native Americans back in the day hated that concept of those natives who would go down to the capital, defeated, and in a humble way, after owning everything, and after the pride of people like Powhatan Tsenacommacah, and the pride of people like Tsenacommacah, and all the other elders that came before them, and it was just something that they just couldn't look upon. And I believe if those people was living today, they would just be hanging their head in shame to see what's happening now. And the thing about it, the people who do it now, they do it in pride. They do it happily. Because they've been totally 100% broken down and dismantled and defeated in almost every way. And most of these people are Christian today. In almost every way. And so they never practice their original faith of the Native Americans. They never knew that because these people were the ones that was Christianized. The Christianized ones were always very, very easy to manage. And the ones who basically kept the native philosophy, hello, how's it going, Ms. Mizani? How's it going, Mizani? How you doing? How's it going, yes, Mizani, how you do? So, these are some of the things. We're talking about Eastern, we're not talking about Plains Indians. I know a lot of people from foreign countries believe that the Native Americans live in teepees. Well, no. These Native Americans on the East Coast lived in longhouses made out of wood, not teepees. And most of the time, if you did have genealogy, real genealogy from Native Americans, it doesn't exist because they just didn't feel the need. The real Native Americans never felt the need to keep the same kind of records with the courthouse that the people who had blended with, say for example, British. Those people kept good records because that was their culture. That culture supported them. But if you actually went to check your DNA, a lot of those particular people would have a lot less Native American DNA. And I wish, they said they couldn't find, and see, another reason I believe Matoaka was poisoned is because they could not find her. Today, they cannot find her body because she wasn't important. They just threw her somewhere in some unmarked grave in England, by the way. She died in England. And they just said, okay, we gotten rid of her. She's gone. And they just threw her in an unmarked grave, and that was it. That was all she wrote. And if you were truly a princess, if you was truly royalty, of any type of royalty, you would have been given a huge funeral, especially in some place like England. So you can tell just by the way she was in an unmarked grave. She was just thrown somewhere. And they cannot find, they just say she's buried in this graveyard, but they're just saying this because that's the persons that they turned their body over to when they got off the ship. They just simply, I don't even think they gave her a funeral. They just simply took her off the ship and then set sail, took off. That was it. Now, is that how you treat a royal person? Do you set sail and just take off right after a royal person has died? A princess of a whole, what you consider to be a continent now at this point. You don't know any other Native Americans but her. Her father is the most important person to the English that you can find, or especially to the colonials that you can find. So is that the way you treat somebody who is a royal? See, and this is how you know that the whole story is after the fact, where people are trying to make a fake narrative using this poor person for their own political and social gains, so that they can become somebody important, so they can be considered somebody who is quote unquote an American. And I'm going to say, especially all these people that are saying that go back to Africa or go back to where you came from for the new immigrants that's come here. And I'm going to say that from the way this country started, there is no such a thing as an American. It's not an ethnic group. It's not a race. It's not even a phenotype. It's not a look. The only thing you can really claim if you're original American, or not original American, if you was a white person, you're British. A British person. That's your ethnic group. That's your phenotype. That's who you belong to. You belong to what used to be called Great Britain. Now, matter of fact, it wasn't even just called Britain. It was called Great Britain. These people really had some delusions of grandeur. They really believed they were great because they called themselves Great Britain. I mean, how arrogant can you get? But that's how they were. They might be still like that. Great Britain. And the Great Britons came to the Americas, raped, robbed, and killed at their discretion for their own profit. And then at some later date, romanticize the thing, and now they wish to be the very persons that they genocided by organized conscious effort. Just like it was a very organized conscious effort to enslave the Africans, there was an organized conscious effort to genocide the native. And the only person that was really counting in this group was that if you were British. Now, the trick that happened with the British is that the people here were just greedy. Greed won. Because what happened with the British is that, because you had loyalists even during the Revolutionary War, was the people here got so greedy, they said, hold on, why do we have to keep sharing it with all these aristocrats? I mean, we're doing all the work over here. We're the ones that got control of all of the resources. Why do we have to give it up? And the Boston Tea Party was basically white British people pretending to guess who? Be natives. So every time something bad happened, where somebody's going to get persecuted, it was a native. It had to be a native. It couldn't be a colonial. I mean, in fact, it was such a popular thing to go kill natives for something bad, is that when the colonials felt like they was going to be mad with the British and jack the British up, they dressed like natives so the natives could take the penalty. The natives were supposed to take the penalty for the Boston Tea Party. So you can see how the standard was. You can see how it was very commonplace for a native person to be taken out and killed or persecuted for stuff that they didn't even do. You see how easy it was for a so-called colonial or a British person of a certain phenotype. They start calling themselves colonials. Basically, they were British people. If you were British, you could do anything you want. If you were somebody else, you couldn't do anything. You could not do anything. You had to basically, you were basically, and in today, a lot of these white families want to be the one to descend from Pocahontas. Of course, they call it Pocahontas, and they even call the natives Indians, which no Native American wants to be called Indian. It's kind of like calling a black person a nigger, or calling a Chinese person a chink. When you call a Native American, I'm just FY, just want you guys to know, that's what it is. Because that's how they're going to take it. They're not going to, now, if you're a Native American who calls yourself an Indian, there's a very strong chance you're a fake Native American and you're not a real Native American. You're somebody who perhaps have a relative that was Native American, but by and large you identify white. Because nobody who identifies as Native American, culturally, I'm going to say culturally, because there are some people who do identify as Native American, but culturally they are not behaving anything like Native Americans. but they like to call themselves that. Now, there's a lot of different, like I said, there's a lot of different definitions of that, because these people were assimilated. These people were propagandized and romanticized into something that you would want to be. I mean, there's all these cowboy movies. I remember when I was young, my grandfather was Mattaponi Native American. And he lived in the hood with black folks. He was married to my grandma, who basically looked like a black woman. And but he looked like a white man. Now you said, Grandpa, why do you vote for the cowboy Indian story is on? And the Indians are circling the wagon, and these guys just picking them off, just killing them like they're just, ain't nothing to it, like you up in the arcades or something. And I said, every time a Native American dies, you celebrate. You go, yay, yippoo, yay, got another one, got another one. He said, the reason why I don't care nothing about the Native Americans that's getting killed in this picture is because they're stupid. Who would circle a wagon and just let somebody shoot them like that? Because the Native Americans will appear from nowhere and then disappear stealth. They fought stealth. They fought. And then he said, they ain't nothing but a bunch of Italians with some wigs on. Anyway, that's basically what he said. And so I kind of had a point, as though he was just, it was just something for him to look at. He wasn't so much that he considered those people Native American. He didn't even consider people you see in the movies Native Americans. He considered these some Italian-looking guys with wigs on and shaved. That's what he thought they were. And then I said, well, you know, that's what they are. These are not Native Americans. These are actors. Because I know what people that look like Native Americans look like. And this is a white dude with a wig on. And so it didn't really matter. It was just one set of white guys shooting another set of white guys. And it was comical that one group was real stupid, while the other group was really smart. And that's how you portray. And in real life, Native Americans were not stupid. They were not the type of person who would just, sit there like sitting ducks. I mean, the person they called Geronimo, and the person they called Cochise, these people were very hard to kill. They could never get to these people. And they had to make a treaty. Same thing when General Custer, in the Midwest, when he went to, he was killing people, he got surprised too, because he found out just how resourceful the Native American could be when it came to defending himself and his people. And so, and they didn't do so much the typical things. Yes, they were very brave, because oftentimes they was going up against, especially in the Midwest, they were going up against Gatling guns, basically with machine guns, with war clubs and spears and bow and arrows. Even if they had a gun, how much ammunition did they have? They had to get most of the ammunition from some Canadian trader or somewhere, from far away. So, but what they could do with the resources they had, no matter where the Native American encountered the European person, they did a very, very smart war campaign against the enemy. Never did they do anything really, really stupid. And so likewise, when they finally started learning how to be a planter, a Virginia planter, they were outdoing some of the peasants from England who just didn't have, you know, you had the aristocracy, you had the smartest Native Americans starting to become planters, and you had peasants with peasant type of brains trying to compete with them, and they were losing. And then you had very smart African people who had survived a lot of stuff. In Mexico, they had been educated in Spain. Who knows? Maybe they were one of these Moor people. Maybe the Moors have a point. But they were some smart people. And they figured out a way to survive. You can go down the East Coast and you can see a group of people called the Gullah people. You can see a people called the Ochagichis or the Geechee people. You can see a lot of people like that, where there were people that was coming up from as far away as South America and the various islands, by way originally of Africa, blending with the Native Americans and settling. The same thing in Louisiana. You see that all over the place. So before, in the 1500s, before the British got here and basically claimed them, and that was the whole thing. Donald Trump said he likes Andrew Jackson. The reason he says that, because Andrew Jackson went down to Florida and killed all of the Native Americans and escaped slaves out who had blended, became the Seminoles. Seminole simply means semi. That's not even a fully native word. It's an English concoction word. Basically means somebody that's blended with African, Native, and white. So most of the time they would have been a Hispanic person. You know, Seminoles. And so that's the Seminoles became a tribe out of a bunch of broken native tribes and out of a bunch of escaped Africans who escaped to the Florida area. And the same thing with the, I don't know if you call it the Cajun or the Creole, I don't know which one of these people, but oftentimes they were escaped people also. Some of the original people in the deepest woods were a cross between French, from Europe, African, and Native Americans. That's who they were. The same thing happened in the Virginias, but that was really between the British, who were more strict than the Spanish, who were more strict than the French, who didn't, they mixed still, but they kept a much more strict, way of dominating, keeping power over the people of color. Whereas the Spanish and the French was much more soft with that. It was easier for certain people of color to get some esteem, to get some rank, to grow up in status. It was much easier for a person to do that in those cultures than it was in the English culture. And that brought up the Trail of Tears. And that is why you find people who might be on documents as slaves by the Native Americans living amongst them, who were in fact family members. They were not slaves. They were family members. And the problem is that the English had these systems in place where they forced the Native Americans to claim these people as slaves because they simply didn't look right to be able to go free. So the only way they can leave the area was they had to leave the area under the protection of a status of Native American. They could not leave the area under the status of African. They just couldn't. Because the African was not allowed to do that. The only person they wanted to get rid of was the Native, because the natives were all in the woods. They were coming from everywhere. They could come all the way from West Virginia, Kentucky, back to the area after being gone, you know. You know, for example, I might have family in Georgia who might decide they're going to move right back to Virginia. And the natives were doing that all over the place. They didn't know that white people had moved into the area. So they were moving around too. They were leaving the area, joining other groups, coming back. So the natives were everywhere. And the white people would get confused and say, I thought we killed all the natives off out of this area. Where did these new ones come from? You know, we counted all the natives and I thought we got all of them. We knew all the names. Here's some new natives here with different names. And then there, look, some African looking ones. I mean, so it started to get very confusing in terms of how these people were going to subjugate. The natives were very difficult on how they was going to get subjugated. The African person had a very distinct look. And he basically came in on a ship already in stocks, already underneath their control. But the Native American person was not on any such ship. The Native American was not on any such, underneath any such auspices or any such controls. So they were very, very difficult to categorize and to organize. So what you had to do with the Native American, you just had to get rid of him. You just had to either kill him or you had to force him to leave and never come back. And so either you got him to volunteer to leave, or you intimidated him to leave, or something, or you killed him. You know, it was something like that. Or what you would do is have this person kind of blend into the community until they became, you know, basically domesticated in such a way that they were no longer natives. Because the native lifestyle of being free, the last free people in America was the Native American. That was the last free people. Now there are some other people who are free, but they are of British they were of British origin. They were not. When I say free, I'm talking about the last brown people in America that was truly free was the Native Americans. And then they weren't really free because what happened was they were driven out. So they were driven out because they simply didn't understand how to stay put. They didn't understand how to follow the rules, the new rules. They didn't want to. It's not that it's so much they didn't understand, they didn't want to. It was not part of their culture. There was no reason for them to do that. It was only a reason for them to actually want to be it was only a reason for them to be exactly the way they always were. And so over a period of time, there are, I mean, like I said, once you had some natives who stayed on the reservation, who did become renegades, who did exactly what they was told to do, that's when the country could start to become a country. Whereas without any fear of that anything could happen to them, the people of English descent could basically do whatever the heck they want. And that's when they got bold enough to fight the British in the Revolutionary War. And right at that moment, that's when the so-called colonials felt like, okay, we were poor in England. Remember that Grandpa told us we was poor, and this has happened to us, and that has happened to us, and now we're going to be wealthy. We're wealthy people. We built something here, and we want to keep it. So anyway, these, I'm not going to say teachings, but this way of thinking prevailed, was taught, because they didn't want things to go back to the status that it was in England when they were peasants and they were on the bottom. And it took so much work. They had to do so much killing and murder and everything to get everything that they built. So it was taught to keep the Native American down and to preserve Christianity at all costs. And also, in addition to all those things, to keep control of the resources. And that would be your main resources, like your timber resources, the fur resources, and eventually, I think over time, even the farming resources. Because you had a lot of, especially after the Civil War fell, when the planters were no longer the plantation people, you call them planters, you call them plantation people, when they were no longer little small kings. Because you got to remember, that's why we have something called states' rights. States' rights comes from those same people who had basically taken power, and they were trying to keep power. And so these people become very, very wealthy through the slave trade. Some of the first families that moved in became extremely wealthy. And they wanted to keep that going as long as possible. And of course, when the South fell during the Civil War, it was very difficult to keep that status going. So, and of course, you got blacks legitimately able to build in the South. Blacks had got the legitimate right to own some land, purchase some land, and they was used to working hard. I mean, they was working hard for free. And they began to actually build a lot of wealth up in the South, in various areas of the South, not just Virginia. Now, some were able to keep their property without people like the Klan basically coming in and disrupting. But these people tried the same stuff. The Klan was developed out of the same group of people who set up this situation here in Virginia, the original slave kind of thing. That's basically a system that keeps other people on the bottom and keeps a certain other group of people on the top forever and ever and ever. So that's basically the name of the game. And that's another reason why I'm doing this, because this is the beginning of it. This is the start. This is how it all got to be a thing. It got to be they figured out, they institutionalized it right here, dealing with these people here. And so Pocahontas is a symbol for people who know. Is a symbol of that institution, of what they did to grab power in the first place. After arriving here from England, to become somebody, this is what you had to do. You had to be able to do ruthless stuff like this. People ask you, say, well, how can certain people be so ruthless? Because this is what you had to do to dominate. This is exactly how it was done. There was no this was how you kept the authority. This is how you kept things your way. You know, this is how you kept things where your people and your way of seeing things stays on the top, and everybody else's stuff goes to the bottom. And so it's really interesting, I think, today, with today's culture, where somebody says, you're not going to replace me, like in Charlottesville, Virginia, by the way. It's amazing that these people are thinking they're going to be replaced. Is there a certain guilty conscience here involved? I think so. And it's just amazing that I think this happened in the state of Virginia. It's happened in the state of Virginia because I don't think that's a coincidence. I think those same group of people, and they stay hidden kind of. They stay kind of hidden. You know? They kind of hide in certain obscure places where I'm going to call those rural places, where it's just basically them. And they can come and go and conjugate as they please amongst people that's, again, English. I just call it exactly what it is. Like us. And they feel like this is their country. They even forgot that they stole the country. They don't think they stole the country. They believe this is their country. They believe they built this country. They don't believe that African people had anything to do with building this country. Nor do they think that Native Americans have anything with building this country. They think it's only them that built it. Nobody else. And I'm going to say that all of Europe got rich based on the sufferings of certain people. All of it. Not some of it. All of it. And, okay, so I done some more painting here. I kind of got sort of the face of John Roth. And you can go Google John Roth's face on the internet to see this man was almost in his 50s. He was in his 50s. What man 50-some years old be marrying somebody who's 12, 13, 14 years old? Does that make any sense? Is a 12, 13, 14-year-old girl interested in a man who's 50-something years old? Not 50, but 50-something? Did that even look like that could be a love relationship? To have 2 children with somebody after they've kidnapped you? Does that make any sense at all? That it's based on love? I mean, like I said, you have to really stretch your imagination to even want to believe the lie that's told. The only people that tell the truth is the Mattaponi natives. Matoaka was raped. Anybody who is on the Mattaponi reservation who is Mattaponi or Pamunkey and is truly Mattaponi or Pamunkey will tell you she was raped and would be offended by the Disney story based on the fact that she is still, it's like going to Queen Elizabeth and basically raping Queen Elizabeth and then making a lie movie about it. You know, basically make up a complete lie movie. And I'm like, oh my gosh, how in the world can you go to somebody's, how could you go to somebody's ancestor who is a queen, by the way, not a common person, it's their ancestors, to their number 1 person, and basically rape her, then lie about it when it's known that that's what the case, and then after that to make a movie about the lie. It's just the audacity, man. It's just the insensitivity to others. It's just outstanding. It's just not even something that is. It's just not even something that's okay. I mean, it's basically saying, well, we're a white male society, and all we care about is white male issues, and this is not a white male issue. Therefore, we want to make a happy little story, ha ha ha, and we want it to be a wonderful story about how America started with this person falling in love with her captive, with this person falling in love with a person who raped her, killed all her people, killed her husband, Cocoon, murdered him, took her away from her daughter, didn't even honor her daughter at all. They had to hide her daughter instead of killed her. Then had 2 babies, then made up a lie about the children to justify the fact that she got pregnant based on the rapes. And you can say that they're John Roth children, but how do we know that they were even his? You know, there was multiple people involved. So the bottom line is people tracing themselves to Pocahontas, maybe just a common person who was one of the group people who raped Matoaka. You could have had a very common, nasty ancestor. Nothing to be proud of. And perhaps even if you're tracing your stuff to John Rolfe, I'll say you have nothing to be proud of. The man, your ancestor, was a rapist. Your ancestor raped somebody. Your ancestor was not a good person. Your ancestor was about material gain. And even today, and status. And even today, those same people, that's what they're about, seems like to me. They're about status and claiming false grandeur. And everything is fake. Everything is artificial. Nothing is real. You have a pretend historical history. So, okay, so also, I'm going to just start, I'm going to change the topic a little bit to something a little bit more light. With the Tsenacommacah used to use for insecticide, or as, you know, they were woods people, so they had to keep the bugs off them. They used walnuts, black walnuts. And it was a type of oil that they used on the black walnuts with the type of oil. And they would wipe this on them, and that was a natural insecticide. And then they also had leaves of this particular walnut tree as well. And they would basically take the nectar from the leaves to keep insects off of their skin. So they could literally walk around. This would actually not only just keep insects away, but to keep parasitic worms away. It kept a lot of things away. So the Native Americans had a lot of things that they did that was basically survival skills. So some of this they taught to the British colonials that came, and some the British colonials did not receive. But it can be toxic, and it can be toxic even to plants, but it was okay to be used on their skin because these people still lived to be well over 100 years old. And so they knew how to use it to keep bugs off of their skin, because most of their travels were, most of their interactions were, you know, they were basically, their skin was exposed to the sun. And naturally, if your skin is exposed to the sun quite a bit, you're going to be a very brown person. You know, you're going to be a person who is very tanned by the sun. Let's put it that way. So, this is some of the things that they did to keep themselves in the natural habitat and still be able to survive and do just fine. So they cooled themselves by basically not wearing shirts, both the men and the women. At the most they had on was like a type of apron, both the men and the women, type of apron. And only a type of apron when they got up to a certain age. And even at that age, they didn't necessarily have to wear the apron all the time. They were quite comfortable, completely naked. The original natives. And even some cultures, even today in that area, still use the walnut leaves as an insecticide. They still, you know, would go get the rubber gloves and get the walnuts and get the leaves and make this. And they would actually, you could put it all around your house, you could put it all over the place. And this was how they did with their houses, to keep their houses free of pests. So the Native Americans had their own way of doing a lot of things that I don't think a lot of the colonial people even had a clue of. You know, they just didn't have a clue of it. And also there was black walnut milk. That basically they had black walnuts they beat really small, and they used hot water to make all these really interesting potions. Again, all of this was done to treat their skin, to keep the elements, the bugs, and different things like that from biting them. Because they're woodland people, but they're also people who use the river works, the water works, canoe. The word canoe is a Tsenacommacah word. It still exists today. The word canoe is a Tsenacommacah Algonquian word that still exists today. That's how popular their mode of transportation. You always see a Native American on a horse. Well, horses came from the Spanish and from the Europeans that came here. Before the Europeans came here, no Native American had a horse. Horses had died off in the North Americas long before the European came. But the Native Americans being natural people, people who worship nature, people who are connected with nature, connected with the horse. The horse was an animal that they saw that longed to be free, just like them. And the horse was a victim, just like them. So the Native American was very, very in tune with the horse. The horse became something that he was very that the Native American was very united with, in terms of there was a commonality in terms of with both, because of the spirituality of the natives, the horse yearned to be free. Especially when they got to the plains. By the time the horse got to the plains, the same thing with the cattle. They had bison here. They had buffalo here. They did not have cattle like you see with the during the West. That's something that the Native American adapted to. But in reality, the Native Americans had bison, buffalo. And what happened with the buffalo is that the buffalo, just like the Native American, the buffalo was hunted. Just like because you can tell, that's why I don't believe the Native Americans necessarily died of just disease. In fact, I think that's kind of made up. I believe the Native Americans died from being hunted, just like the buffalo, just like the wolf. All these animals the Native American identifies with. The Native American identifies with the wolf. The Native American identifies with the buffalo. The Native American identifies with the eagle. Native Americans identify with the turtle. Many other animals, actually. Various birds, but turtles, and most importantly, the eagle. And not just the bald eagle, because the bald eagle gets all of the credit because that's the one with the white head. So, of course, British people will really be interested in that one because they feel like, okay, it's got a white head, it's good, it's like us. But the golden eagle was very important. The golden eagle was a very important eagle. And he's a little bit smaller than the bald eagle, but he's more agile. He's more athletic. The way he hunts is more stealth. It's more surgical. It's respected. And therefore, the Native American would study these animals. Of course, the way he would fly through the sky a certain way. Of course, it's close to the sun. A lot like some of the philosophies of Kemet, which is found very, very interesting. And anyway, make a long story short, the buffalo, the antelope, all these different animals that the Native American revered died off along the same rate. And I don't think the animals got diseases. I think they just was those guns. The guns of the European was here. Those guns were very efficient. Those guns had already depleted Europe of all of its animals. And that's why the European had to come here, because the European had already depleted his own lands of all bisons that roam free, of all of the wild animals with pecks and furs of value, were all hunted into oblivion. They just didn't exist anymore in Europe like they used to. They were like that once in Europe, but they didn't exist that way anymore because the guns were just so efficient. And not only that, just the people had become very populous in Europe. And their way of killing the animals and basically infringing upon the animals' domain is very invasive. And what it did was it caused the animals to cease to exist there. You know, the animals just became less and less populated in Europe. And so what happened was when the European got here and saw all of these animals in abundance all over North America, they instantly realized the wealth of the place, because these animals did not exist anymore this way in Europe. They just didn't exist anymore this way in Europe. There just wasn't any there was just not any animals of that nature left in Europe. The only thing that was left in Europe was the people. And these wealthy families had gobbled up all of the things of value by this point in Europe. Very, very smart people. But they gobbled up everything of value. And the other people who didn't have a chance to get anything of value didn't have a chance to get anything. So they became very desperate. You know, and coming to the Americas, they were very desperate from the beginning, because they saw no hope in Europe. And then coming here, they felt like, okay, well, geez, I need to have a chance. And the only way I can have a chance is I have to assert myself over the native. I have to get along with this system that favors me. And does not favor the African, and does not favor the native person. So animals like the wolf, natives used the wolf to as a semi-domesticated dog to hunt with. People don't think that the wolf could have been used to hunt with, but they actually did. So the natives were quite good in the forest, because the eastern natives learned from one of their teachers. And their teachers was literally the wolf himself. They had a relationship with the wolf. And so when other dogs was introduced into the Americas by the Europeans, like the hound, there were much more docile type of dogs than the wolf, obviously. Native Americans took to those animals very, very quickly, just like they took to the horse. Of course, during this same time, the buffalo was dying out. The wolf was dying out. But the domesticated dogs of Europe began to get embraced by the Native American people. So a lot of times, if you were a British person, you were a hunter, you often had a pretty good time with the native men, because, and a lot of these guys, they became frontiersmen, because I'm talking about a lot of British men became frontiersmen because they really enjoyed hunting native style with the natives, and they got just as familiar with surviving off the land as the native. And so these cultures did start to blend over time. And that's another thing that caused the natives to start to disappear. They simply became friends with a lot of frontiersmen. And of course, the British, the Englishman was always interested in having some land and doing something like that. And they would convince Eastern natives to go west with them. Sometimes as guides, sometimes as interpreters, as in Lewis Clark with Tsenacommacah, Tsenacommacah. So the bottom line is, and notice that they got a girl, Lewis and Clark got a female to be an interpreter for them. And you can tell that the Tsenacommacah language was a very popular language. It was a language that spread over a large area, because Tsenacommacah could actually still translate very far past the Mississippi River. Because some of the languages, even if they weren't Algonquian languages, some of the languages had blended to some level with each other. And so there was a capability for different native languages to kind of be somewhat understood by others. I mean, it's kind of like Spanish and Italian, or Romanian and French, you know? All of these come from a similar root of Latin. So even though their languages are different, and a lot of the definitions are different, certain things can still be understood between these different languages. So even though you might have a different language, there's altogether a different language by this point. You can tell that certain groups had certain common roots, because a lot of the root words of a lot of the root structures of a lot of languages had some similarities. And that's how you can kind of halfway tell